Good evening. We want to welcome you here tonight for our first in-person program in over a year. And we're so excited to be doing this. And I want to thank First National Bank for letting us use their space for our summer reading programs. And this is kicking off our summer reading program this year. Our theme is Tales in Tales. So Tales of Pulaski fits right in. And this is our first adult program, and we'll have another one in June. So keep watching and listening for that, and I will turn it over to Carman. He's going to tell his history. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I am so happy to see everybody, especially that I know so many people here, and it makes me not quite as nervous. Hey DeWitt, thank you for coming and being late. So thank you to the Giles County Public Library for asking me to do this and to kick off their summer reading program. And this one's called Tales of Pulaski with me, Carman Brown. And I think what I'll do is, some people actually asked me if I would do a CBN history nugget about myself, and I think it came from some people that are here. So I'm going to do that first. I'm Carman Brown. I was born and raised right here in Pulaski, Tennessee. In fact, June of '62, I was born right over there in the Giles County Hospital, Cedar Lane and Madison. I went through the Giles County school system here. I graduated in 1980, and at that point, I was off to Knoxville, where I went to UT. It took me 5 years, but I graduated with a BS in communications. I put myself through school, and I worked the whole time. And the neat thing about that time that I was up there is the 1982 World's Fair was going on. And I was able to work there for 6 months. So I took a couple of quarters off and did that, and that was pretty cool. I figured that was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And so I moved to Atlanta after that, and that's where I was for 25 years. I lived all over Atlanta, and I worked in Roswell for a commercial printing company. And the neat thing about living in Atlanta at that time was that the 1996 Olympics were going on, and I got to see the city build that and go to some of the Olympic Games and the Paralympic opening ceremony. Back to Pulaski after that. I've been back for about 10 years. My heart was always here in Pulaski. And I had family members that lived right beside me back then. And both of my grandparents lived right down the street on Mill Street. And they are the Whites and the Browns. And we can start with the Browns. I didn't realize I'd be so nervous. All right, so this is the Browns. That's Juanita on the lower left. She's my aunt. You might remember her. She worked at Bennett May for the most of her adult life. That's my daddy, Hugh. And that's Uncle Charles going clockwise. Uncle Hayden, who moved back to the Cookville area early in life. And that's Uncle Millis on the far right. He lived in the Camelsville, Big Creek area for most of his life. That's my Aunt Anita there on the far right. She moved back to White House, Hendersonville, Tennessee, early in life. And that's my Uncle L.A. in the middle as the baby, and he is up in the Hendersonville, White House area with Aunt Anita. And of course, that's my granddaddy, Edgar Charlie Brown, and that's my grandmother, Willie Mae Taze Brown, and those are the Browns. These 7 kids had 19 grandkids, of which Mary Kennedy is one of. And that was kind of neat, having 19 Brown first cousins growing up. And that takes us to the Whites. And of course, these pictures are from early on, but they're just pictures that are really special to me. That's Nelson and Ivorine White. And Ivorine is the inspiration and the reason that I'm here today talking to you guys, because she's the one that saved all these materials that she thought was really interesting about Pulaski and Giles County. She kept books, she kept scrapbooks, she kept albums, she cut out things, and she saved everything. And I thought that if she's going to go to all the trouble to do that, then I would share some of them. And that's what I've done. And I call them CBN History Mini Nuggets, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But that's my mama on the left. And if you want to see what she looks like currently, she's underneath all this blonde hair right here. Thank you for coming, Mom. And that's my Uncle Ernie, who I've grown up to look quite a bit like, if y'all know him, Ernie White. And, well, I said that's my mom. That's my mom on the far right, and that's Aunt Linda here on the left. Tammy's mama. Cousin Tammy's here today, too. All right, so I'm going to share with you a really neat story that I've told time and time again. And it's next, Teresa. And I'll read it for you because I just like it so much. My granddaddy lived to be almost 97, but on his 100th birthday, I shared this on Facebook. Our granddaddy Nelson White would have been 100 years old today. He led a colorful life and left a colorful legacy. His first daughter, Barbara White, married Hugh Brown, and they had 2 Brown kids. His second daughter, Linda White, married Haywood Green, and they had 2 Green kids. His son, Ernie White, married Sue Williams, and they had 2 White kids. So Nelson and Irene White had 6 grandkids, 2 Brown, 2 Green, and 2 White. And I will say that my cousin Brownie Gatlin married Debbie Black, so we actually have 1 Black family member as well. And people have asked me, what is CBN? Where does that come from? And so this next slide kind of explains that a little bit. I'm kind of silly, and I always have been, and I just like to enjoy life and just be positive or whatever. But I started sharing things on Facebook about Pulaski, and here's one of the ones I shared, June 28th of 2018. Hate to lose a decades-old tree in the greater downtown Pulaski area, but on a bright note, you can see this beautiful old Italianate house turned apartment building turned bank a lot better now. Reporting live from the intersection of 2 banks, the post office and the Yellow Deli, Carman Brown for CBN, Carman Brown News. So CBN stands for Carman Brown News. All right, well, that's enough about me and enough about what CBN is. And what I'm going to do now is just share about a dozen CBN mini history nuggets that I thought y'all might enjoy today. And so this is the first one, and I love the juxtaposition of this because that's about a 100-year-old photo at the top versus what it looks like today. All right, 100 years ago, you might have crossed the Pleasant Run Creek near Sam Davis Park to see a man about a horse. J.D. Kaufman Sr. and Arnie Curry were the men who owned the horse barn. In the early 1960s, the horse barn was torn down and a restaurant was built. It's had several owners throughout the years. Today, you might cross Pleasant Run Creek to see a woman about a cow, or parts of a cow anyway. The woman would be Jackie Perry, and the restaurant is Hickory House Restaurant. It's a steakhouse, see. And some of these I've shared some comments on, and some of them I haven't, but we'll go through these and see what makes sense. And that's some of my favorite parts of these things that I share, is I might not necessarily know much about what's going on, but a lot of times people will comment, and their comments are really awesome. So Bobby Inglet says, we lived on Elm Street, and JD would tell us ghost stories about a headless horseman, scared us to death. And my buddy Aaron Curry says, according to her dad, there is a spring that ran from the hillside, and it ran through an open trough through the barn. That's pretty neat. And then on this next page, Melissa Felker Roller said, wish we had a picture of all the shanties that hung off the hills around there. Daddy said they went as far back as Johnson's Food Town. That would be kind of neat to see a picture of that. Randy Dunavant says that they did, and he remembers when some of them were still there. There was a street behind Dixie Foods, he says, south, that had some pretty rundown houses. People still lived in them, and there just wasn't a lot of rental housing back then. And that's true today. And this next comment is from my buddy Jim Massey. He says, my first memory of it was as Henry's Hickory House. I can still taste the barbecue and bean pot with buttered cornbread, hoe cakes. And getting to go back into the smoker area was like another world for me. I think Don, his dad, must have paid Henry with whiskey because he hardly ever charged me full price. Of course, loved Butch White's tenure there as well. So those were some of the comments on that one. This one was crazy with comments, and I'll share some of those with you as well. And some of them I didn't put as much information on because a lot of times I don't have that much information to put, but again, I get a lot of information from the comments. So for the majority of the 20th century, the Giles County Fair was set up in or around Sam Davis Park in Pulaski. Cowboy Dotson helped folks get in out of the parking lot like a boss. And then I just said, does anybody care to share a fair memory? And we got lots of these, and a lot of them carry the same theme, but I'll go through some of them. Scarlett, who is AKA Scarlett Jose, says, as a 5-year-old, I lived in a house where we now park cars for the football games. I could see the carnival lights from my house. Knowing that night would be the last night of the fair, I waited until Mom and Dad had fallen asleep to run away with the fair. A Lions Club member recognized me and escorted me home In the pouring down rain, Mom said I was mad as an old wet hen because I wanted to be a carny. And Kathy Curry said that she remembered riding the dunking machine whose water smelled like duck poop. She's never figured that one out, she says. Steve Pierce says, as young gents, we used to ride our bikes over there the day they set up. They would let us test the rides to make sure something wasn't loose. We were the forerunners of inspectors, he says. And now we know why Steve acts like he acts today. All right, on this next page, Sherry Ferranda says that she remembers eating at the Episcopal Church food tent. They had stools set up around 3 sides of tent. People were 3 and 4 deep waiting, and she remembers Dr. Shivas manning the grill. And cousin Mary Kennedy Brown says, I rode the dunking machine an entire night. It started out as a sub-deb command, but I liked it. Pete Britton was taking the money and had to get someone to ride, so I just stayed there. Lord of mercy. Doesn't that sound just like her? And more comments on this one. Ava Edwards says that her sister-in-law's grandfather and grandmother lived inside the fairgrounds, and he took care of the grounds. I love the Alexanders and would spend more time sitting in their swing watching people than I did anything else. It was free to get in and to park, and you only had to buy 1 ticket per ride. So us poor people could go too, and we had fun, if only had a little money. And she would get $5 for working for her aunt and went every night that she could catch a ride. And then on down here, Bill Young says, and that's Mr. Exit 14, y'all know, Big Tent on the left was usually the girly show, I think, not sure. And over on the next page, Dale Britton, y'all know Ms. Britton, the Hoochie Coochie Tent. I just wanted to share that because Dale Britton actually typed Hoochie Coochie Tent on my Facebook. And the world's greatest, what was it called? And then Dixel Hemfrey says that I remember one year there was a house, and these women in, let's say bikinis, came out of their house onto a stage-like area and danced a little bit to the song Cocaine by Eric Clapton. And then grown men would line up, pay, and go inside. Dad rushed us right on by. It was in the baseball field. And then I just want to include this because Robert Stanford was in my class, and I like him a lot. He said, love my Uncle Cowboy. He was a good one. And he was. All right, next nugget. The announcement in 1937 that General Shoe Corporation, Genesco, would open a branch plant in Pulaski was received with enthusiasm and joy. Work soon started on the building, which was used for the first time for the Coronation Ball at the Dairy Festival in Pulaski in 1938. The Dairy Festival was a big deal in our town for decades, and I say we need more festivals. The factory opened in August 1938, and except for supervising personnel, all employees were local folks. In 1941, the company was awarded a contract by the U.S. government to supply the Army with 65,000 pairs of shoes. 500 more workers were added to the payroll to take care of this order. During World War II, the factory was able to complete all Army contracts given to them. It's estimated that our plant furnished 5 million pairs of shoes for the Army. An annex was built in 1944 with more folks added to the payroll. And by 1950, things had stabilized and the plant maintained about 425 employees. So I'm just saying that this shell of a building had quite an impact on Pulaski, as many families had someone who worked there at some point. My granddaddy, Nelson White, and his sisters, Estelle and Pauline, all worked there. So the shoe factory, as we called it, held a popular annual picnic for its employees and their families, with the Cracker Challenge being a favorite game. Got a couple of memories that folks had of it. The Cracker Challenge, I believe, and somebody might know it better than me, but I think they were required to eat crackers and then try to whistle. I didn't pick any one of these in particular, but like I said, the shoe factory had such an impact on our city. But everybody from Kenneth McCluskey, who said his mom worked there in the 80s, Robert Stanford again saying his mother worked there for over 40 years, Tana Harris said her mother worked there for 30 years and raised 6 kids. Nancy Teeble said that her daddy worked there, her sister Carolyn worked there, her sister Joyce worked there, and she worked there for 21 years, right before it closed. John Ira Inglet said that his mother and sister both worked there. Elaine Brindley's uncle Mac Christopher worked there, and John Old said his grandma worked there. And so this next one is just where my mama's first cousin, Mike Moore, shared a picture of when my Aunt Pauline and Aunt Estelle worked there. And I think this is just a larger version of it coming up. But I thought that's a pretty neat photo. Again, the shoe company had a really big impact on Pulaski. And I'll share one more here that Daryl Armstrong Tufts says, the pay was determined on piecework. You got points for different tasks. You were paid an hourly rate too. I found the check stub from 1973 where I worked 66 hours. That was 26 hours of overtime. I cleared $88. I was on a job with 2 other men, and there wasn't enough points for all 3 of us to make our time. The other 2 men had wives and children, so I let them make their time. I didn't really care anyway. And then I shared under that my granddaddy used to tell stories of how he had finished his work faster than any of his coworkers, and he'd get to leave early. And he was proud of the fact that how fast he was and how his peers admired him for that. So this is the Richland Plaza Hotel on the west side of Pulaski, Tennessee Square in 1945. The original hotel at this site was built several years before the Civil War and was called the St. Giles Hotel. It's presumed that the hotel was occupied by federal officers during the war. After the war, the original frame structure was torn down and replaced with a brick structure and renamed the Arlington Hotel. In 1910, the name was changed back to its original name, the St. Giles Hotel. The hotel sold at auction in 1918 to a group of prominent town citizens who completely remodeled it and reopened it in 1919 as the Richland Hotel. In 1945, the property was sold to J.M. Hobbs, who renovated it yet again and later sold it to Brian Pigg, who called it the Richland Plaza Hotel. And I don't have a comment, but I do have a photo that Mr. Rand Hayes had probably from the 1970s of what we probably remember it looking like when it was Fashion World. All right, so we'll move on to this next slide. I really love this photo because I don't really remember the Sam Davis Theater, but I just think it's a great picture. And this photo of the Sam Davis Theater in its glory days is courtesy of Mr. Lloyd Garner, thanks to his daughter, Debbie Garner Hollis. It was built as a theater in 1930, and by 1950, the Sam Davis Theater was operated by the Crescent Amusement Company out of Nashville, Tennessee. The theater had 1 screen and 754 seats. My mama saw movies there all day on Saturdays for 12 cents. The building became a furniture store in 1967. It was bought by Giles County in 1997 to become a courthouse annex, but that never came to fruition. The Methodist Church subsequently bought the building at auction, and the building currently houses a bookstore, and I believe the bookstore owner owns the building. And so an interesting rumor from a commenter on Flickr is that I believe the historical aspect of the building related to a Civil War jail cell that still exists in the basement of the building. This is where the child hero of the Confederacy, Sam Davis, was held for 7 days before his hanging by the occupying Union troops. Here are some photos of the first jail cell in Giles County was a rough log house built on the banks of Richland Creek near the old train depot. The first log jail sat on the southeast corner of the square near where Pulaski Estate Law is today. It was destroyed by fire in 1814. A new jail was rebuilt of brick near the northwest corner of the square where it again burned and again rebuilt, and where the jail remained until after the Civil War. And I put in parentheses, this explains why Sam Davis was kept in a jail cell below what later became Sam Davis Theater. The building was destroyed by the retreating Confederates. But apparently that's where our jail was during the Civil War. In 1867, a jail was built on First Main Street with an apartment for a jailer's family, and that's that upper photo. And it was torn down and replaced by a square brick building in the lower photo in the late 1960s, early 70s. Local ladies might remember catcalls coming from the building as they walked by. Anybody? Mary Kendi? Mama? My mama does. All right, when the newest county jail was built in Industrial Park in the late 1990s, the building on South First Street was torn down, and the property is now a parking lot adjacent to the Pulaski Municipal Building. These photos are courtesy of Mr. Rand Hayes, and I've shared quite a few photos of his, and I'm very thankful for him letting me borrow those. On November 23, 1809, 9 days after Giles County was established, the legislature chartered the first academy in the county called Pulaski Academy. In 1822, the name was changed to Wurtemberg Academy. In 1849, a college charter was obtained for the old academy by the name of Giles College. The building was used continuously for educational purposes, with exception of several years during the Civil War when it was used as a hospital by federal troops. The town of Pulaski purchased the property in 1885, and in 1887 the building was used as the first public high school in Giles County. In 1914, an annex was completed, which afforded space for both elementary and high school grades. In 1937, the high school moved to West Hill, and the building served as Pulaski Elementary School until the early 1950s. And I put that my mama remembers running up and down those steps in the top photo during recess. This long-lived building was last used as a recreation center, and it was located where our current recreation center is today. And these photos are courtesy of Mr. Rand Hayes. So that building sat there for like 150 years. And this, here's a comment by my Aunt Jerry that I'll share. So this picture, she says, was the west view, and that would have been facing town. In 6th grade, Johnny Curry would have us sit and try to draw from memory certain things we had seen often. One day, she told us to draw the courthouse. She did that for Dalton Tomerlin's benefit. He made it look like he had copied a photo. Mine was pitiful, she says, and I could not see why that assignment was given. When I became a teacher, I understood, she says. I know, other than letting him really shine, she was amazed at his ability. That year, we had some kind of assignment to do outside class. Dalton's project was a birdhouse that was the replica of my parents' home. I pestered him till he let me have it, until he relented. It hung on my mom's clothesline post until I was grown and married. Finally, it rotted, but I always remembered the talent a classmate had. And she says her grandson can draw like that. And she continues to be amazed. And she's talking about that little one right there, or one of them. No, Gus. Oh, yeah, talking about Hope. And this is a picture or a rendering of what the building would have looked like in 1849 as Giles College. Okay, so East Hill Market was located at 515 East Jefferson Street, where cousin Billy Brown's cottages on Jefferson are located today. Rand Hayes made these photos a few days before the building was torn down. So Linda Rogers says, Kathleen Kidd and her husband ran it. They had twin boys, George and Bob. They lived one street over on Madison Street. And then she goes on to say, I remember hitting Johnny Long with a Coke bottle in front of East Hill Market. I threw it at him and hit him in the arm because he came across College Street, and I thought he should have stayed on his side of the highway. He invaded my territory. To this day, he says, I ruined his pro baseball career. Yeah, right. And of course, Ricky Fox says, you always was a pistol. And I think we can all agree that Linda Rogers is a pistol. So I think this photo is kind of neat because it looks like just a lesser version of our current courthouse. It's beautiful. Our current Giles County courthouse is a showstopper, but our previous courthouse wasn't too shabby. It was completed in 1859, cost about $27,000, and was constructed of the best materials by the finest workmen available at the time. It withstood the ravage of the war between the states when the town was occupied by federal troops and the flag of the Union flew over it. Thomas Martin, Martin Methodist College's namesake, paid a Union general $3,000 to save our town from being burned to the ground, and that included this courthouse. But our fourth courthouse was ultimately still destroyed by fire on April 20th, 1907. The amount of insurance covering it was only $14,000. Interestingly enough, I've posted about our current courthouse, and it cost $132,000, furnishings and all. And the rumor is, and it may be true, that the citizens of Pulaski were so upset by the excessive costs that they voted all the county commissioners out of office at their next term. So I wonder what they'd think of it today, though. I didn't plan on reading this, but I'm going to read it to you. It's from my buddy Jim Massey, and he is a wealth of information. He's Bobby Massey's younger brother and Don and Marguerite Abernathy Massey's youngest son. But he is a wealth of information about Giles County history, and he texted me this yesterday, and it kind of pertains to this. So, and of course, this is his version of what his Abernathy family has handed down to him through the years. But he said, for what it's worth, Charles Clayton Abernathy cleared the land for the courthouse square. He is my 3 times great-grandfather, had 18 children, won acclaim early on by marching with Andrew Jackson into the Battle of New Orleans. They were held up in a cave at the mouth of the Elk River for a few weeks, waiting on the water to lower so they could cross the shoals and have reinforcements to engage with the native Indians on the south bank if necessary. It should be noted, he says, that much of the labor that cleared the land for our square was slave labor. Better to just get that out there and appreciate that equality has largely prevailed. And then he went on to say, for all the folks who go to the river, it's a bit of an eye-opener when you think about that scene of walking across the Tennessee River. I thought that was just a neat story. All right, that takes us to Wynn Service Station, located on the corner of North 1st Street and Highway 31A, back when cars and service stations had style. There's a Spirit gas station there today. A couple of comments on that one. Mike McCord says that he spent countless hours either on that front bench or inside the store talking with Robert and Buddy and all of the usual customers. It was like being in Mayberry, he says. I think that's kind of neat. And then on the next page, Lawana Douglas says she remembers it very well. Mother used to get her gas there. They pumped it, washed her windows, and checked under hood. Mr. Wynn was a sweet man. Remember Daddy buying me a Firestone red truck there. Wish I still had it. Great memories. Michael McDade said that he loved the Wynn brothers. I spent many a days there at their Texaco gas station getting my flat bicycle tires patched up, candy bars, double colas, and bubble gum. And then on this next page, I'll just share this that Kim Gowan shared. She said, this was my pawpaw's and Uncle Robert's gas station. I have some great childhood memories of hanging out after school. He used to let me sit in his chair at the cash register. I still have the chair. Buddy Wynn, pawpaw, greatly missed. So this is what I wrote when I first shared this picture because I didn't know a lot about it, but I love this photo. Pulaski was awarded a commercial facade improvement grant back in 2019. You might have noticed some of the improvements to our downtown area in the way of new awnings and signs, paintings, windows, doors, brick repair, and other upgrades. And I said, thanks, Historic Downtown Pulaski. Here's a glimpse of what the east side of our square looked like during the mid-20th century, before the current flat metal sidewalk cover was installed around parts of the square. Most shops had individual awnings, cloth or otherwise. And then I went on to say that like most small towns, our downtown area was a lot more robust before Walmart, but I do believe our downtown area will be a little more lively after the MMC-UT merger. But of course, some people knew more about this photo than me, and come to find out that this was 1959 and it was Pulaski's sesquicentennial celebration. That is the marching band for the Bridgeforth School that you saw in the photo, and their majorettes. And on this next page, Sharon Harwell says that she remembers trying to help roll those canvas awnings and them leaking on everyone passing by. A strong downtown is the life of any place. This picture was a great reminder. Thank you for sharing our Pulaski. And next, Chevy Land Troop says that when they put the metal awnings in, they called it Operation Town Lift. I think it was around 1966. And Jerry reiterated what I said. I think Jerry says this would be especially crowded because of the parade. However, on busy days and especially Saturdays, it was very busy and had crowds of people. Dang, Walmart really put a cog in the businesses. And that's true. On October 4th, 1978, Tammy Wynette was reportedly abducted from the parking lot of a Kane Sloan department store in Green Hills in Nashville. The alleged kidnapping happened as the country star was out shopping for a birthday present for her then 8-year-old daughter, Tamala Georgette Jones. Wynette reported that she had left her car unlocked and was accosted by a strange masked man who had crept into her back seat when she returned. I felt a poke in my side and heard a man's voice say, "Drive," she recounted a few weeks later. All I could see was a brown glove, a lot of hair on his arm, and 2 inches of gun barrel. As the pair drove, the man strangled Wynette with a pair of pantyhose so forcefully that it left burn marks. Wynette said the man also punched her, all before leaving her in a remote area of Giles County and getting away in another car. All in all, the 2-hour ordeal found Wynette 80 miles away from Nashville, near the house of a woman named Junette Young. Do y'all remember this? Okay, and so this is one of the comments that I got after that is my buddy Katrina Birdsong Page says, "Carman, did you know that one of her daughters resides in Pulaski today?" She's one of my dearest friends and a former co-worker, Jackie Daly, who I've come to find out is one of Tammy Wynette's 4 daughters, is one of the coolest people I've ever met and shares so many great stories about her childhood with her mom. So of course I had to meet her and friend her, and she shared this with us. I was in high school when this happened and came home one day and was told Mom had been kidnapped. This was the most terrifying day of my life. I couldn't understand who or why anyone would do that to her. We waited for a call that never came, and I resigned to the fact that I might not ever see her again. It was over as quickly as it began, and I didn't learn till I had married and left home what really happened. This is the old Tennessee Hall. Tennessee Hall was erected on the campus of Martin College in 1913. It was a girls' dormitory for years. I think it later became a co-ed dormitory. The building was destroyed by fire in the mid-1970s, leaving only the columns unscathed. One of MMC's longtime benefactors, Grace G. Grissom, founder and matriarch of Mrs. Grissom's Salads and former chair of the college's board of trustees, along with her husband Herbert, had a gazebo built on campus that was comprised of the remaining columns. All 4 columns were saved from the fire, but one of the columns subsequently fell off the back of a truck and was destroyed. So the Grissom gazebo that sits near the location of the old Tennessee Hall was constructed with 3 of its columns. And that just makes me wonder that, we know this is very symbolic of Martin College, this gazebo with 3 columns, but it was really meant to be 4 columns. Pulaski was chock full of big, beautiful homes during the 1800s and early to mid-1900s. We had our fair share of wealthy citizens. This diamond in the rough was so appealing to someone with foresight, passion, and lots of extra dough, I say, that it was moved to Peytonville, Tennessee sometime in the latter half of the 20th century. It stood at the northern end of 2nd Street in front of the American Legion Hall, where Dickey's Florist is located today. These photos are courtesy of Mr. Rand Hayes. Isn't that a beautiful old house? So this is one of those posts that I learned quite a bit after I posted. Come to find out, Rhonda McMillan Kemp, and Rhonda was born and raised right here in Pulaski, Tennessee. She moved it in 1991, moved into it in 1992, and she's still there. And she says later on there, she says, "I'm sitting in the upper corner room as I type." And of course, I was intrigued by that and asked her to share more information and a photo. And she tells us on the next one that the builder was the founder of the First Presbyterian Church, James Hall Brooks. He died in 1833 and is buried in Maplewood. The George Woodring family next lived in the house until his death in the early 1900s. The Butlers lived in it until her death in the 1940s. It was virtually abandoned until we bought it in 1991. And we asked her to share a current photo of the house. And that's what it looks like today. That's a picture from her daughter's wedding. But check out that entrance. All right, y'all, this is the last one. This is probably the biggest photo treasure we found in cleaning out my grandparents' house. There was a note with a photo that read, "This picture of a stone and corn mill was made in 1900 and was the property of M.L. Bud White, my 2-times great-grandfather, at Shores, Tennessee. Shores is located in southwest Giles County. The 3 men on the walkway to the mill in the center photo are Mr. Wells, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Gibson, who operated the mill. Bud White is seen on the steps of the store on the left with his son Clarence, my great-grandfather, and daughter Minnie White Newman, my 2-times great-aunt, who wrote this note and whose house I live in now. The mill was built around 1817 by Elijah Anthony and washed away in the flood of March 1955. The store burned on December 14, 1902, and afterwards, many years later, the property was sold to W.C. and Virginia Cole. They built a brick home where the store was located, and Virginia still lives there today. Thank y'all for letting me share these with you. I hope they brought back some sort of memory or made you appreciate Pulaski even more. So I'm on Facebook, and it's just my name, Carman Brown, and all these posts that I do for CBN, Pulaski History Mini Nuggets, I make public so anybody can see them. There's tons more of them. I've probably shared about 100 or 110 of these, and I just picked these today because those are the ones I wanted to share with y'all. Thank you again for having me.